Welcome everyone. Today's tutorial is on Kanban for software development, the basics. So, how many of you have heard of Kanban? If your impression is something like maybe it's a Japanese delicacy or a type of a sushi dish, or maybe you feel like Googling it, this tutorial is for you. As the title of the tutorial suggests, Kanban basics, it would only teach you the basics. Rest of you out here are more than welcome to watch this tutorial, or you may wait for my next tutorial on this very topic, uh, which is in the very near future, where I'm going to discuss some more advanced techniques involving Kanban. Uh, well, I was reading some statistics the other day, which suggest almost 40% of agile teams are using Kanban or a mix of Kanban with some other method like XP or Scrum. This is staggering, isn't it? So, without further ado, let me quickly walk you through what's the agenda we have today. So we are going to kickstart this tutorial with a basic understanding of on Kanban. Uh, then we would look into how to use Kanban. I'm going to discuss different scenarios you probably would face when using Kanban board and how to react to those different situations or scenarios. Um, then visualization. Well, some of you may say why I have three pluses against visualization. Well, uh, only explanation is that I got three slides on visualization. Um, and then finally, I'm going to conclude this tutorial with a talk on Kanban matrix. So what is Kanban? Kanban is a Japanese word meaning signboard. Uh, it is actually a lean scheduling system developed back in 1950s by Toyota Motor Corporation. The best thing about Kanban is that it can be applied right where you are today. Um, and I guess opening the door to Kanban will also let you peek into some of the lean practices, and there is a wealth of knowledge for you to learn and improve upon. Which brings me to my second point, myths around Kanban. Well, there are quite a few to be honest, but I'm going to touch upon a few. The first one is Kanban is for factories only. Um, well, can Kanban be used only for manufacturing processes? The obvious reason of this myth, I believe, is that it was first used by Toyota. So credit to Mr. Taichi Uno, who is considered to be the father of Toyota production system. Well, today I'm not going to talk or delve too much into the history of Kanban. I guess probably you may Google it. But coming back to the myth, so how it gets into the software industry. So there is one name worth mentioning, Mr. David Anderson. Like back in 2004, he actually pioneered a more direct implementation of lean thinking and theory of constraints into software development while working for Microsoft. Um, and this is what he called Kanban system for software development. So, uh, and this is the very reason Mr. David Anderson is considered a pioneer in adopting Kanban in software development. And since then, I believe Kanban has been applied by pretty much all the major tech companies. And nowadays, overwhelming majority of DevOps teams have adopted Kanban method for managing their workflows as well. So, um, myth one, pretty much busted. Jump to number two. Um, Kanban, you do not estimate. Well, this is true. We do not estimate user stories or tasks in Kanban. It's optional, but do it only if you have to or need to in your context. Um, Number three is Kanban, and Scrum. Well, I guess it's kind of a love-hate relationship. Uh, I Teams can adopt either one successfully. I believe there are numerous examples where a team combined the two to their benefit. And yeah, you guessed it right. It's called Scrumban. If you ask me personally, I'm not a big fan of hybrids. Can Scrum benefit from more granular work in progress limit, or can Kanban benefit from Scrum's time boxes? I guess it depends to your situation. Uh, but I am certain that limiting WIP can be revolutionary for some organizations. And if you are not limiting WIP, you are simply not implementing Kanban. Uh, so that's pretty much on myths. Core principles. So Kanban is actually based on three simple core principles. So it's quite lightweight. Um, how light you ask? Well, XP has 12, Scrum has 6. So hope you got the idea. So the first principle, workflow. Visualize what you do today. So in the most basic form, a Kanban board has just a few columns, such as to do, in progress, and completed. So anything you do, you follow these steps. You have stuff to do, you have stuff that you are doing, and you have stuff you have done. When adopted to software development, as you can see in this example, Canvas system usually starts with a board and a visual card that represent items on your product backlog. Uh, the second principle is WIP, or work in progress limit. It actually means limiting the amount of work in progress. So what it does, it helps the balance the flow based approach. So teams do not start and commit too much work at once. So what we are saying basically is we do not want to build a feature that nobody needs to build right now, or we do not want to write more specs than we can code, or we do not want to write more code than we can test right now. And finally, we do not want to test more code than we cannot deploy. So, um, so that's how you define WIP limit. So in this case, we've defined a limit of 8 story cards for this Kanban board. So we cannot have more than 8 items at any given time in this column. Uh, uh, Interesting question. Can done column have a WIP limit? Um well, why not? You probably can have it for, I guess, celebratory reasons. Maybe when you have to release maybe a number of items or user stories into production, the product owner may need to organize a pizza lunch, let's say, for the team. Uh, well, we are getting a little off topic. So coming to the next principle, manage flow and continuous improvement. Uh, this is also called enhancing the flow. So when something is finished, the next highest thing from the backlog is pulled. So Kanban promotes continuous collaboration and encourages active ongoing learning and improving by defining the best possible team workflow. Um, Lead time and cycle time are widely used terms in the world of Kanban, and these are the two metrics that I'm going to discuss in the later part of this tutorial as well. Uh, so what is lead time? Lead time is the complete process. How long it takes to have an idea to get into production. And the focus for us is to minimize the lead time. Cycle time, on the other hand, is only part of the process. How long does it take to develop this feature, or how long does it take to test this feature? How to use Kanban? Uh, a Kanban board can be like this. So here, for example, they have work items to do. Then they will analyze, then some development, testing, and then ready. Um, so this is where we can decide the definition of done. Uh, um, it really depends on your process and your workflow, and is really unique to every organization or to every department or even every project. So I guess not to get stuck with one way of visualizing your workflow, just go with the flow and see what the flow for each department or organization is. Okay, let's take a look at our Kanban board. So we have a backlog, which is the very first column. This is nothing but basically our to-do list. And then we have an analyze column, and this analyze column we have divided into two stages, doing and done. Same goes for the development, then test, and if the test pass, then it goes into ready, and if it is already at some point in time, we will promote it into production. So Kanban board work like this. You do not push work towards your team. Rather, if the team member is ready, they will pull their cards or tasks or user stories. So in this case, the BA or whosoever is responsible for analysis work pulls the card from the backlog, and once he is done, he will push the card into the done column, which would inform or indicate the developer that the task is ready to be picked up for development. And the same way, the developer, when he is free, will pull the cards into the doing column to show that they are working on the task. And this is basically from where the visualization comes from. You just see the process as it happens. Uh, so how do we know how much work can we take on at one point in time? So what we do is we introduce WIP limits. Um, and as I discussed earlier, the reason for WIP limits is that if you focus on one thing, it goes much faster than switching between different tasks. So how we are going to come up with WIP limits? Uh, I suggest in the beginning, let's keep it simple. So in this example, let's say one per person. So what this means is the analyze uh, in any column which includes doing and done, we say it at any time analysis or analyze cannot have more than one work item or one user story. So if we have one analyzer, which is what the assumption is in this example, we know that the analyst or the BA is working on only one item at any given time. Same goes with the development. In this case, let's say again that we have one developer, so at a given time we would be only working on one item. Assuming it's a sprint, and as the title suggests, it's a perfect world, the user stories would or the user story would move through all the stages and ultimately would get done. So you can see we have picked one user story and it is moving through the process, and ultimately it gets done. Uh, but I guess there is no such thing as a perfect world or a La La Land unless you are in a Bollywood movie. So let's look into some of the situations or scenarios we would encounter on Kanban board. So let's see this scenario. Uh, where's the bottleneck? Well, there's none, but they are in the making. So here we have two analyzers working on two items or two user stories. We have two developers who are done, and while the two testers are busy testing. So in this case, if the developer is done before the analyzers finishes their work, guess what's going to happen? Basically, we're going to run into idle development issue. So here's a bottleneck or a problem about to happen. This may not happen, but it's a potential problem and you need to keep an eye on. So what to do? Uh, Before it happens, what I can do, I may go to the analyzers and say, hey guys, would we be able to finish these tasks on time? Or maybe go to the developers and ask, can we use one of those developers for testing? So it's potentially a case of testing too long. Uh, so it's all about collaboration. It's all about teamwork. How can we avoid this to happen and to make it a continuous flow? Here is another scenario, and this is of a bottleneck. Can you guess where's the bottleneck? Yes, it's the testers. All the developers out there, they go like, yeah. Well, either it's taking the testers long to test due to the complexity of the task, or maybe the developers have written a buggy code. But whatever it is causing a bottleneck in the process. So what can we do here? Maybe we can increase the WIP limit for the testers to 3 and bring in another tester. But isn't it an easy and quick resolution to our issue? With this spirit, if we keep on increasing our WIP limits every time we hit a bottleneck, we soon would require an army of resources to keep the work items flow on our Kanban board. Uh, while there's nothing wrong in increasing WIP limits, but this usually is not our go-to preferred option. So if any of you is familiar with the theory of constraints, this is termed as elevating the bottleneck. But first we should exploit or subordinate the bottleneck. So I don't have any intention to talk more on theory of constraints in this video, but just to keep it simple for this example, we may ask one or two of the idle developers to come and help the testing team. That's an immediate resolution or an immediate action. This action can be regarded as exploiting the bottleneck in the process. Other actions might involve splitting the testing work. Let the testing team test only high risk testing and delegate lower risk testing to business analysts, analyzers, or developers. This action can be regarded as subordination, uh, or you may simply ask the developers to write a quality code. So there is another scenario. As you can see, the developer column. We do not have to have one person, one task association. That's one of the flexibility of Kanban system. Here we have paired two developers on a task or a user story that is bigger or complex, or maybe we do not have enough user stories for all the 3 developers to work on in the first place. But if you notice, we have another problem here. The testers are idle. So what does these testers do now? At this time, you look at your tester's skill set. Sometimes the tester can do a bit of development work too. If this is the case, maybe we can pair him or them up with one of the developer, or maybe they can pair up with the analyzers, or maybe they can write some automation or deployment scripts. And if none of it can work, you need to think what else can they do so we can make these testers valuable. to the team. It could be retraining, updating documentation, and so forth. So let's look here. If one of the developers hits a roadblock and stop, what's going to happen? Eventually, first, testers would become idle because they are expecting a workload of 3 developers, and right now they are getting a workload of 2 developers because one of the developers is stuck. And number 2, analyzers would eventually become idle because they are expected to give work to 3 developers and now only can give work to 2 developers. So basically there would be an oversupply there. So in this scenario, maybe one of the senior developer, when he's done, can go and work with the developer that's stuck. So this is slide number 1 on visualization, Kanban card. So what to write on those sticky notes? Uh, well, the first and foremost thing is the title and a short description. Uh, you can have an avatar or your photo to define the ownership of this card. Uh, I guess it depends on your team sense of humor as well, what to use here. Uh, Deadline. It so this task or this user story is to be done by certain date. Uh, an electronic archive. As in most cases, not all the information can go on this little sticky note. You can stamp the card also when it enters a column or a stage or a phase in your process. It's very important, especially if you're only using a physical board. Uh, Doing this, you can see if your cycle time or lead times are going up or down. Other markers can go on this card as well, that can help the team members to know what to do when they see the card. You should need to go and ask someone. So one thing you can add on the road to visualization is that what kind of work, what type of work we are working on. Right now, it's a yellow sea of stickies, but they are different. So that's a bug. Here's a change request, and those normal yellow ones are user stories. So how it helps, you ask? Well, we can say that 50% of the items on the board should be user stories. So we clear up our backlog. Or if the board started to turn red, it's a sign of too many bugs. In Kanban, classes of service are used to distinguish between the urgency of the work items. Most common ones are expedited, fixed delivery date, and standards. Most of the items follow the standard class. So here the team has introduced another swim lane called urgent. So anything that comes here takes priority over anything and is acted upon by the team straight away. Matrix. So first thing, why do we need matrix? Well, simple. Uh, it is difficult to improve something that is not being measured. Matrix give us an indication of where we can improve. So we can introduce a change and review the matrix to decide if the change was successful or not. So it is one of the feedback loops of Kanban. First metric I'm going to talk to is throughput. I think this is the most popular metric of Kanban. Throughput is the number of work items your team is delivering in a particular amount of time. Or we can say how many cards or user stories are done in a particular iteration. If the team is using iteration for cadence, it may depend on the team too. Like the development team would probably use per week or 2 weeks measure, But a support team, which is, let's say, work on 20 to 30 items per day, they may calculate throughput per day. So here you may use a throughput chart that shows how the throughput or velocity is varying. It shows the week number, week after week, how many items the team is finishing. As you can see here in this example, there is not enough consistency. There was some sort of consistency here, but later on the team was not able to finish enough items here, which lead to an increase over here. But this is what it is. This is how the team is performing. You can take this chart to the team in a retrospective meeting and ask them what they make sense of this. They may themselves would realize that their throughput is not sustainable or predictable, so they may need to do something about it. Uh, the next metric is cycle time and lead time. Uh, well, the lead time is the time it takes for a work item to go through the process end to end. This is from the time it was created in the backlog to the time it was delivered, or you may say release in production. Um, Mostly control charts or run charts are used to track lead times or cycle times. So let's look into an example. The x-axis is the date, y-axis is the lead time in days. If you see the overall pattern, how the lead time has performed, you can notice a downward trend. In the beginning, there was high variation. So what are the action proposed here? Uh, One action probably is to increase backlog refinement. We may need to talk to the product owner who may need to break down the user stories a little better, or maybe need to define a clear acceptance criteria or definition of done. Somewhere over here, you can confidentially say that the lead time is well controlled within 10 days. And later you can see that the lead time has come down to 7 days, which shows that the team is improving the discipline of finishing the work faster. Uh, Before I move to the next metric, one more observation I like to share. If your cycle time and lead time gap is getting closer, it's an indication of backlog starvation, hinting that as soon as the work item is dropped in the backlog, it's immediately been actioned. So that means the team doesn't have a backlog. Well, I'm not saying that it's uh, not necessarily something bad, but maybe one action we can take is to increase the backlog. The final metric is work in progress. It's basically the number of work items the team is working concurrently. The goal here is to limit the WIP. Mostly cumulative flow diagrams are used to identify bottlenecks. Uh, CFD or cumulative flow diagrams shows the stability of your process over time. It accumulates and tracks each task that has ever entered or performed at any stage in your workflow. So in this example, it's a cumulative flow diagram for a development team. X-axis you see is the date, Y-axis is the number of work items the team is committed to. So now this CFD is telling us a story. It's a 20 to 25 days. Uh, so the question is, what is the value? Can you see any problem over here? So one problem is this zone. You can say there is too much work in progress. The gap between two lines show how much work is in progress. Too wide gap between two lines means too much work in progress. On the other side, you can see over here, there's two lines that are sort of touching each other, which is a possibility of starvation. That means the tester do not have work on this particular day. That's the beauty of CFD. You can track and see what kind of dysfunction in the flow is creeping in. That's it, folks. Hope it was helpful. Uh, and thank you for your time. And now start Kanban from tomorrow. Bye for now.